Hey Finksters! Now in today's lecture, we will be discussing couple of topics. In the first topic, we will be learning how to remove multiple spaces in a given string. Then we will move on to learn how to check if a string is empty or not. So without further delay, let us go ahead and learn how to remove multiple spaces from a given string. Have you ever come across strings in Python that have unnecessary spacing between the words or characters, as can be seen on the screen? So as you can see, this string has lots of unnecessary spaces which are denoted with the help of blue markers, and in this case we want to remove these unnecessary spaces and only keep a single space between the words. Now if you have come across a situation like this, then you are at the correct place to find your solution. In this tutorial, we are going to learn about different methods to remove multiple spaces in a given string. Now this means we will simply remove the extra white spaces so that there remains only a single space between each word in the given string, as I just mentioned. So let's dive into the solutions to this problem. Now the best way to remove multiple spaces in a given string in Python is to use regular expressions. I know many of you might not be very comfortable with using regular expressions, so do not worry, for you I have a different solution. But if you know, or if you even know the basics of regular expressions, then you can solve problems like this with ease. So let's go ahead and find out how we can use regular expressions to remove multiple spaces in a given string. In order to use the regular expressions, you must import the regex library. So let's import that, import reg. So now we have imported the library. Now let's say that this is the given string to us, and as you can see that this string has lots of extra spaces between the words. So these are what we are going to remove. And now this is where the regex module comes into the picture. We need to use a method of the regex module which is known as sub. This sub method will return a new string where all occurrences of a pattern that we specify in the old string will be replaced by the pattern that we will specify. So we will be leveraging the power of the sub method of the regex module to remove multiple spaces from the given string by simply replacing the extra spaces with a single space. Now let's visualize this in our code to understand this better. Let's say that we will store our output in a variable res, and now we simply need to use our regex module re dot and then the sub method. Now within this sub method we need to pass three parameters, 1, 2 and 3. So in the first parameter we need to pass the pattern which we will be replacing. So what's the pattern which we want to replace? It's the extra spaces. So how do we denote that with the help of regular expressions? It's quite simple. It will be space and then we need to use plus. So this expression tells Python that we want to replace all the occurrences of one or more white spaces in the given string. So that's the purpose of using the plus operator in this case. Now what will be our next parameter? It is going to be the value which will replace the extra spaces, and that is nothing but a single space in this case. So that means we will replace every extra space with a single space. So let's say that this word hello and have three spaces between them. So three spaces will be replaced by a single space. Finally, we need to go ahead and feed in our third parameter, which is nothing but the string itself. So that's it. Now let's go ahead and print the original string, which was s, and then let's go ahead and print the string that we want, which is given by res. So that's it. Now let's execute our piece of code. And there we go. As you can see that this was the string that was given to us, and when we removed all the extra spaces, this is the string that we want, and this is how you can use regular expressions to remove extra spaces from a given string. So that brings us to the end of our first method. Now let's dive into the next method which will help us to solve this problem. In this method we will be using the split method, which is a built-in method in Python that will help us to remove the extra spaces in the string. Now let me give you a small introduction to the split method. Split method is a built-in method in Python that is used to cut or split a given string based on a given separator. You can specify any separator according to your requirement. However, by default, the separator is always a white space. So without going into the theory of it, let us try to understand this with the help of the example itself. So once again, this is our given string. Now let's say that we will be storing the output in our variable res. Then let's go ahead and use our split method upon the variable txt, which contains the original string. So that's it. Now before doing anything else, let's go ahead and find out what's the output in this case, because this is not the last bit of the program. But before that, let's see what happens when we print this. So let's execute our code. And there we go. As you can see that we now have a list which consists of all the words of the given string as the elements within it. So hello is the first element, and is the second element, and so on. Now our task is to simply go ahead and form the entire sentence from these elements. So we simply have to go ahead and create a string from the elements of a list. And to do that, we have to use a method known as join. So let's see how we can use the join method. All you have to do is use join upon this res variable, which stores the list elements, and in order to create the string, we need to separate each word, that is each element of the list, by a single white space. And how do we specify that? We simply say we need a space between each word, and then we use a dot. So that's it. We are simply telling Python that we want to combine all the elements of this list and create a sentence such that we want to insert a single space between each word. Now let's see what's the output. And there we go. This is the exact output that we wanted. So this is how you can use the split and the join methods and remove extra spaces from a given string. So what happened here was every word from the string was stored as an element in a list. And how did Python know when it has to store or which element it has to consider as an element within the list? To do that, it used the split method. And since we didn't specify anything within the split method, so it knew that as soon as I find a white space character, that means this is where I have to consider that I have found an element for the list. So when it was going through the string text, as soon as it reached hello, that is O of this word hello, that is the character O, it found that the next element is a white space. So immediately it stored the word hello as the first element of the list. After that, it went on, and finally once again it found that A is no longer a white space, and then it realized that yes, this is my chance to create the next element of the list. And this is how it created the entire list. So I hope this method is clear. If you have any doubt, please mention them in the comments below. I'll be more than happy to answer all your queries. Now it's time to move on to another approach using which we can solve this problem. And in this approach, we are going to use the replace method to remove the extra spaces. Now this is one of the simplest ways to remove multiple spaces in a string. In this approach, we will be using a while loop wherein we will check if there are multiple trailing spaces in the string. If yes, we will replace the multiple spaces with a single space and store it in the original string with the help of the replace method. This way we will keep checking it till the string has no multiple spaces, and finally we will return the string. So that's a lot to grasp, but as soon as you visualize the code, things will be crystal clear. So let's dive into the code. So this is the given string. Now our next task is to check if there are occurrences of more than one space in the string. So I'm going to check if there are a couple of spaces in the string. In that case, we will iterate over the characters of the string. And how long will we iterate? We will iterate as long as there are occurrences of more than one space between two characters in the string. That is, characters which are not white space. So how do we do that? We simply say while and then we provide couple of spaces within quotes which tells Python that it has to iterate as long as it finds more than one space in S, which is the given string. Now, as soon as this condition is true, we will simply go ahead and update our string such that we will replace the occurrence of more than one space, which are a couple of spaces in this case, with a single space. So that's it. Once Python is done with the entire process, we simply go ahead and print our modified string, which does not consist of extra spaces, as S. So let's go ahead and find out if this works. And there we go. As you can see that we have successfully removed all the extra spaces. To visualize this properly, let us first print the string that we had. And now let's go ahead and print both the strings before and after the processing is done. And there we go. This was the string that was given to us. And this is the string wherein we have removed all the extra spaces. So I hope this process or this approach of removing extra spaces was clear. And with this, we come to the end of this section of our discussion. We will now discuss how to check if a string is empty or not. Now, many of you might be wondering, why did we go through the procedure to remove multiple spaces in a given string? Because we could have simply discussed how to check if a string is empty or not. Yes, we could have. But to understand how this concept is working, you have to understand what is the difference between a blank string and what is an empty string. Both of these are not the same thing. An empty string is a string which has nothing within it. That is not even white spaces. Whereas a blank string is something which has a single white space or a single space within it. So this right here is a blank string, while this is an empty string. Now, how do you differentiate between the two? Let's go ahead and find out the length of each string. So length of blank underscore string, and then let's print the length of empty underscore string. Now len is a method which is used to find the length of a given iterable. In this case, the given iterable is a string. So let's go ahead and find out what happens in this case. And as you can see, in the first case, which is a blank string, the length is 1. And why so? Even though this is a single space, it is still considered as a character. Hence, it is a blank string. While empty string has no character present within it, hence it is an empty string. Now, when we discuss our solution to check if a string is empty or not, in that case, we will discuss two cases. In the first case, we will have an empty string, that is a string that does not have any space within it. And in the second case, we will also discuss a blank string, and as a user, you want to consider that string as an empty string. So how will you use that string as an empty string? Since we have already learned how to remove multiple spaces in a string, you might already have an idea what we might be doing in that case. We will simply go ahead and strip the white space character from the string, and then we will consider it as an empty string. So that's enough theory. Let us go ahead and find out how we can check if a string is empty or not. In this approach, we will find the length of the given string. If the length of the string is 0, that means that the string is empty. If the length is greater than 0, then that means the string is not empty. Now let's have a look at the example that I have used. We have a list which goes by the name strings, and within this we have two elements or two items. The first item is a blank string, while the second item is an empty string. Now we will iterate over each item one by one and then check if that item is empty or not. So to do that, we have used a for loop, and then we have used the enumerate method. Now just a quick recap to the enumerate method. Enumerate method will help you to keep a track of each index of that iteration. Like for example, let's say when we are in our first iteration, then the value of index or the counter index will be 0. Then when we are in our second iteration, then the value of index, which is our counter, will be 1, and so on. So that's the advantage of using the enumerate method. It will help us to create a counter that will help us to keep a track of the index or the item of the index in that particular iteration. So we simply go ahead and iterate through the items of this list strings, and then we find if the length of that item, now the item is given by I, please note that the item is given by I, whereas the index of the item will be index itself. So we are finding the length of that item in the particular iteration. If the length is equal to 0, for instance, in the first case, the length of this item is going to be 1. Let me also insert another line wherein I am going to print the length of that particular item, len of I. Now this will help you to visualize the output better. So if the length is 0, then I go ahead and print that the string at that index is empty. While if this length is not 0, then I print that the string at that index is a blank string, because in this case we simply have a blank string and an empty string. So according to this program, our output should be string at index 0 is a blank string, and then it should print string at index 1 is an empty string. So let's go ahead and find out if this works. And there we go. As you can see that in the first case, the length of the string is 1 because it is a blank string. And that's the output. String at index 0 is a blank string. While in the second case, the string is an empty string, hence its length is 0. So the output is string at index 1 is an empty string. You simply have to use the len method upon the given string, which will give you an idea whether the string is empty or not. Now the second approach is even simpler. We will simply use an if statement to check if the string is empty or not. Yes, that's how simple this is. We will simply go ahead and check if I. So that means I am asking Python to check if a value exists, then print this statement. Otherwise, if a value does not exist, then print this statement. Now in the first case, when Python iterates over this list strings, it finds that the first string, that is the first element, is a blank string. Now remember, blank string is not an empty string. It is a string which has a single character in it, that is the blank space. So in that case, this if statement gets executed. Now I need to make a little change here because we need to print in this case that this right here is not an empty string, rather it is a blank string, and this right here, that is the statement within the else block, should print it is an empty string. So that's it. This is how you can simply use the if statement to check if a string is empty or not. Let's find out if this works. And there we go. As you can see that Python prints string at index 0 is a blank string, which is indeed a blank string, while in the second case it prints string at index 1 is an empty string, which is true once again, as the string in the second index is empty indeed. Now let's discuss the third case where we have a blank string and we want to consider it, or we want to convert it to an empty string. So how do we do that? To do that, we simply have to use a method known as strip. So this means as soon as we use the strip method along with our string, which is I in this case, it will eliminate the white spaces and then return the string. So what happens here is, in the first iteration, the string is a blank string. As you can see that the first item is a blank string. But when we use the strip method, this blank space gets eliminated and now we have an empty string. So now Python should print that the string is empty in both the cases. So let's go ahead and find if this works or not. And there we go. As you can see that now Python prints that the strings are empty in both the cases. Why so? This is because it simply went ahead and removed the extra white space or the single white space that we had in this case. And as soon as it did that, the string became an empty string. Hence, the output is as you can see on the screen. So this is how you have to work with blank strings and empty strings. I hope you found this lecture to be helpful. If you have any doubt, please mention them in the comments below, and I'll be more than happy to answer all your doubts. Thank you.